The weather's not always the best, but good for writing because you kind of huddle up and sit inside. So we had that to bond over.
For sure. Very cool. So we thought we'd start with our kind of our writing journeys, like where the books that inspired us. So for me, these are like the three that I love to share. I grew up in Ohio, loving to read Laura Ingalls and her life on the frontier, the Ingalls family. My husband jokes that I'm constantly quoting Ma Ingalls. And I think like those who've read my books will see like how these are in some ways reflected in my works. It's like she captured a time and a place that was really unique, and it was something that had kind of passed. But she did it in a way, she learned to write partly by translating the world for her sister who was unable to see. And I think that really just gave her a really amazing way with words and description. And then I love fantasy books. So the Chronicles of Narnia was a journey that I went on over and over. I discovered them in my library, in my fourth grade classroom, and I just completely fell in love with that. And I think of my books, even though they're contemporary, in some ways as a portal fantasy, like where a character goes through a portal into another world, has an adventure in another land with like people and cultures and rules and regulations and all kinds of things, and then comes home transformed. And then of course there's A Wrinkle in Time, which also appears in my works in the form of like, I enjoy science and incorporating that into my works.
No, those are great picks. These are some of my favorite books to recommend. You might have seen them before. One thing that's not pictured is Peter and the Starcatchers, which was, I grew up, that was one of my favorite books growing up, and it was the first time I had read so many different plot points that come together at the end of a book, and I was like obsessed with Peter Pan growing up, like biggest crush on him. So I loved reading about his story and things. So that's one of my favorite like childhood books. That means a lot. But over here at Dance of Thieves, obviously, I think that was my first intro into like romantasy and dual point of view, and I loved the fact that I could read from the guy and hear his thoughts. I was like, wait, he's obsessed with her, and I loved hearing that. So that was my favorite. And Alone with You, the Ether by Olivia Blake. Her writing is just, it's so lyrical. It's like, I could eat it. It's like a candy bar. And I love her work and the way that she like develops her books with like the urban fantasy and really poetic writing. And then One Dark Window, because I love a good duology. Just very like spooky. Very fun. So these are my favorite things to recommend, and I think they kind of give you an idea of what I like to write.
That cover, by the way, is gorgeous.
I know, it's beautiful. It's beautiful, very pretty.
Here we go.
Yes. Okay, so go ahead and tell us about your work and how it all came to be and where it went, I guess.
So I actually didn't know I could be a writer. I was in Ohio. I never read books about girls that looked like me or told stories the ones I knew about. So my home life felt very different than the lives that I saw of my classmates in Ohio. And so I think it just took me a really long time to realize I could be a writer. Loveboat Taipei is about an Asian American girl who goes from Ohio to Taipei. Her parents sent her there to learn Chinese language and culture. It's actually a real program that's been around since the 1960s that I went on as a teenager. And it's actually known within the community as like the summer of like debauchery, basically. The kids have no parental supervision, they're just going crazy in the best of ways, sneaking out, clubbing and drinking snake blood sake and all kinds of shenanigans, but also a lot of hooking up, and that's why I got its nickname Loveboat. After the 1970s TV series, because a lot of couples actually came out of this program, and this is one of those stories that like had been in me for so long. I never saw anything like it, and I just didn't know I could write it for so many years. But I ended up writing 4 novels on the way to Loveboat Taipei. Had to bury them for various reasons, and Loveboat Taipei was my first to come out in the world. So it's now a trilogy. The 3rd one just came out last year and follows Ever's younger sister, Pearl, who gets to go on about 6 years later, have her own adventure, but also we get to see what happens to all the other characters. And Mark ends up coming back as the new dragon, which I had a lot of fun with. It's been really wonderful to get the reception that we've had in the press, especially because the books actually came out during pandemic, and so I'm a pandemic author. But I was really grateful for the support of Harper and Barnes & Noble, as well as the press. And they also came back to support when the movie came out, Love in Taipei. it's been amazing too that a book about an Asian American girl has been able to reach so many different communities. So it's been translated into a number of languages. It just came out in France and Poland most recently, and that for me has been really thrilling. My editor, who's Italian American, actually told me that she really related to Ever's family, like this high achieving family that had a lot of expectations for their daughter. And that was really, I think, an amazing thing for me to realize, like, oh, these stories that seem so weird to me that I've never read anywhere were actually resonating with other people. So we had a lot of fun with this.
They're so fine, all of them. I love this. I just want to pick your brain about all of it. Continue.
Yeah, so we made a movie, and that was incredibly fun. What should I talk about here?
I just want to know how, and I'm going to ask you this later, so I don't want to move too fast ahead, but how much were you involved in the process of the movie making, and like, were you there for casting or writing or anything? Like, is there anything you can tell us about that?
Yeah, so I was there for the whole time. And that was actually really important to us because there wasn't anything like it, an all Asian American story and cast, and it was really important to myself and to my reps that we preserve the authenticity of the characters. So yeah, the most fun stuff was definitely the casting. Ross Butler was our first. He agreed to play our love interest. He's super awesome, and I was thrilled when he agreed. And then we kind of cast around him actually, so that's why they all look so awesome together. Who knew that you cast like around the main? But I just totally fell in love with these kids. We were on set together in Taipei for 35 days at the height of pandemic. And we were really protected from the world because the borders were closed and no one else could come through. We had to do a 2-week quarantine. But once we did the quarantine, we were free. Like at the time that the world was shut down, we were actually free to just go out in the world and to go through the night markets. And we kind of joked that we had our own Loveboat experience. But yeah, the process is like you find a screenwriter, you find the director, you cast, then you do the principal photography, which is what that experience was, and then it goes into post where the movie gets cut up and edited a bunch of different ways until we have a film. But 300 people make a movie, which is a very different experience than one author and one editor each making a book.
Wow, that's incredible. I'll ask you more about it later. Stay tuned. Oh yes, I'm so excited to talk about this. Okay, I'm going to tee up some questions for you about your newest, like, standalone debut. So Kisses, Codes, and Conspiracies. It just came out in August, and it's your first standalone novel outside of Loveboat, Taipei. And what was it like to pick up a new story in a new setting?
Yeah, so this book is very different from the Loveboat Taipei books, although it still has some of what I hope my readership has enjoyed with the romantic comedy aspects, but it's actually a young adult thriller, and it's set in Silicon Valley, so it's closer to home for me. But I felt like in some ways there's similarities in that I get to deeply explore a new location. So Loveboat Taipei explored Taipei, and Kisses, Codes, and Conspiracies takes 3 teenagers from Palo Alto High School on a romp throughout all of the Bay Area. So they end up taking the Caltrain to Berkeley looking for a certain researcher. They end up at the Palace of Fine Arts, which is gorgeous, and then there's a climax at a Barnes & Noble where a helicopter actually takes off on the roof. And that was so much fun, because I love Barnes & Noble. I protected everyone in Barnes & Noble, by the way. Everyone was safe.
Good.
So I was fortunate that this book actually began as a short story as part of Marissa Meyer's anthology Serendipity. She had invited me to write a short story that came out right at the same time as my second Loveboat novel. And my editor loved the story so much that she asked me to write a novel, and my agent was like, this is not normal for you to just get a random novel out of a short story. So I felt really, really fortunate to have that opportunity. And what she loved was actually the setup. So the setup is Tan's scrappy family in Palo Alto were able to afford their home by renting out the back rooms to his classmate, his new classmate. She basically becomes his classmate when she and her mother rent out the rooms. Her father passed away, so her mother's widowed, trying to get back on her feet. And Tan and Winter, they have a good friendship, they get along. Winter looks out for his younger sister. And in the short story, they didn't have a relationship because he was dating someone else, Rebecca, who's the third girl in the back, or the second girl in the back. And she was a parachute kid from Shanghai. So for those who aren't familiar with the concept, it's these kids who like kind of dropped off to go to school, to go to high school in the United States, and they don't have their parents around. They have actually a consultant, an education consultant, or some other kind of supervisor who's keeping track of them, making sure they're getting their homework done. But usually they, similar to Loveboat, they have very little parental supervision. So they end up having like a lot of autonomy over her life. And Rebecca, as Tan later discovers in the short story, turns out to be the daughter of a billionaire family in Shanghai. So when her parents find out she's dating him, even though he seems like perfectly fine, like his family bought a house in Palo Alto and they're scrappy entrepreneurs, to her parents, he's like from the wrong side of the tracks. And so it was a class warfare story. And what my editor loved was the setup that they lived in the same house and that they got along so well. So she asked, can we get a babysitting story? Where the parents go off and the kids are left home to babysit Sana, and like what would happen? And so that's what gave rise to the story.
Yeah, that's amazing. Before I move on to my next question, I wanted to ask, what was it like turning a short story into a novel? Was that difficult, kind of like piecing it together with something larger, like lengthening it?
Yeah, it was a different exercise. I think every new book is a different exercise, and this one, it felt like I started with characters. I started with like setting. There was a lot of things that were already established that I felt like I had to honor, but eventually I did end up changing a few things just to make it work. But the characters stayed the same and their setup stayed the same. And from there I had to figure out like, okay, now what's next? But I did feel like short stories are so hard to write for me because you have to write everything in 5,000 words, and I did have more. And so for me, it was actually an opportunity to take a breath. I could breathe and like, okay, now we can kind of figure out, okay, what's going on with Tan? He doesn't realize how good he is. And then he had this trauma with his ex-girlfriend, like fleeing the country to get away from him. And so he just is really down on himself at the beginning. And he can't get off his butt and do anything. He will not apply for internships. He won't like go after the girl that he truly loves because he doesn't think he deserves these things. And so it takes this whole journey of him being the target of international thugs that are chasing them. So basically what happens is Rebecca shows up with a bunch of Tang Dynasty coins that she stole from her father, and it turns out there's a lot more to these coins than meets the eye. They're worth millions, hundreds of millions of dollars, and that's why she's being chased. But they don't actually realize this right away. It unravels over time. And so this is what like drives him around the valley. But he needs that journey. Like he needs to like have these people actually come after him and need him for his skills, for him to actually realize, oh hey, maybe I actually have something.
No, that is so interesting, because I think that's something that all of us kind of go through, especially growing up in such a pivotal age. You're like, what do I do? You know, so I love that that's kind of a big message of the story, so that's amazing. And then lastly, I want to ask you, how did you end up choosing his companions, Winter, Rebecca, and Sana?
So I had to think back to the short story, but Rebecca, I think, just has an interesting experience that I know about just being in the community, like these kids that have no parental supervision right in our own backyards. But also she's very strong-willed girl who basically is looking for a family. And so I had fun with her, like in this story. Basically her journey is like finding family. But she kind of comes from a world that you can't even imagine. Like she seems like she's so ungrounded, but to her that's very realistic. Like the world that she lives in, the world that she was raised to be, she's groomed to be the heiress to this fortune, and this is like a real story. And I think I mentioned I love fantasy, and so I think I love to find the stories in our world that are like fantasy worlds. So she is an heiress to an empire. And then Winter is like the flip side, like without a father, with her mother like going back to school to try to support them. They're really on opposite sides of the spectrum, but she's very grounded because her father died early. She knows that life is short and she doesn't want to waste it. And so I think they provided two different contrasts, two paths for Tan in his own journey and figure out who he is.
That's amazing. Can we give a round of applause? That was so good. I love hearing about that. Amazing. Okay.
Wow. So let's turn to these. I'll slide through these quickly. So we threw our slides together, but we're gonna back up later onto some of the other things. So let's talk about your work.
Yes.
Yeah, so tell us like how it began with this children. I want to preface this by the first time I heard of Lauren, I was visiting my publisher in the UK in London, and she handed your first book to me. And she's like, you have to read this book, it's so good. And so I was so thrilled to learn that we were going to get to Keynote together.
I know, I'm so excited. I'm having a great time. I hope you guys are too.
So tell me what was the inspiration and how you got started with this book?
Okay, so, wow, the whole journey, how I'm even sitting here today is very right place, right time. Very thankful for it to have happened as it did. But yeah, Powerless was a shower thought when I was 18. Never thought I would get the chance to write in my life. I was like, I loved writing growing up, but I didn't think it was in the cards because I was like, I'm not sure how to get to that. So I had started on the internet just talking about books that I love to read, and I would just yap, and for whatever reason, people wanted to listen. And so I amassed like this just really loving and supportive family on TikTok and Instagram. And again, when I was 18 and I had this shower thought for a book, I was like, I'm not gonna write it. Like, what am I gonna do with it? This is crazy. So I hopped on a TikTok live and was like, what do you guys think of this idea for a book? And the people on the live were like, yeah, you should write it. Like, we would read it. And it's funny too, because even there was a girl on the live named Peyton, and she was like, I've never seen my name in a book before. And I said, okay, how would you like your name to be in my book? And we're still friends to this day, and we follow each other, so it's fun. I learned a lot on that live of like, what would you guys like to read? What type of characteristics of a, love interest do you want to see? So I really got to pick like the reader's brain in that sense. So yeah, I started writing it in my childhood bedroom. I was 18, and I was working and in school, but it was just such a passion of mine, and it was just the book that I wanted to read at that age, and I think I really needed it at that time, and these characters and the story, and so I somehow wrote a book. I'd never done anything like that before, and I guess I'll give you a little elevator pitch of it. So basically it's set in a kingdom where there are elites, those with powers, and ordinaries, those without. And our main character, Peyton Gray, is an ordinary, and she is forced to blend in this elite society by pretending she's a psychic. So one thing leads to another, and she obviously runs into like this really hot prince or something. And then she gets thrown into these trials that are meant to showcase the abilities she doesn't have. So either the enforcer, Kai, will find out, who she is, or the trials are gonna take her out because they're really difficult. So again, I just kind of had this thought of like, what if I did the opposite of the chosen one trope and kind of had everybody surrounding this main character have powers except for Peyton. And that's where it all stemmed from, and I wrote it. I went away to school for a while, wasn't sure how to even publish. And then eventually I was working in the library at my university, and I called my mom and was like, I want to come home and self-publish. And she was like, okay, I'll give you a semester. So I came home, literally Googling how to self-publish a book. I had no idea what I was doing, pulled it together somehow, and it was out. Can't believe it was last January that all happened. And then my publisher reached out a couple months later, and they picked it up, and here we are. It's been an insane journey.
Thank you. Yes, that definitely deserves a round of applause. You'd like to say how you've grown up with the series. Like, what has changed since writing that first book at 18?
Yeah, I would say a lot has, right down to even the writing. I feel like I've grown a lot with these characters too. And as you see the series go on, it gets a bit darker. Like this third book, Fearless, there's a lot happening. A lot of strings are coming together, and I've never written a finale to anything, so that was a challenge and like wrapping everything up, but it was so fun. But I just feel like I've grown a lot in what I like to read now too. I'm excited to branch out and age up a little bit with my readers. I think that's such a beautiful thing. I love that I have the privilege to do that because we're all kind of growing up together, which is really fun. So I feel like, especially with Fearless, I've taken a lot of time to sit down and meticulously go through it and be like, okay, this is what I want it to be. I'm really happy with it. And yeah, I just feel like writing in general, I've just grown with everything, and I'm having such a great time. So thanks for coming along. I appreciate it.
I love it. It actually makes sense that my editor gave me your book because I also love The Ordinary Girl and Those Extraordinary Circumstances. So it's very much that story. But she also finds out she's remarkable too.
Exactly. I love that. Finding watching characters find their own strength, whether it's, you know, in contemporary, like real life scenarios, or in the fantasy world where Hayden doesn't have powers, but she finds her own way to be powerful. It's beautiful.
What scenes are your favorite to write throughout your series?
I love writing really mundane, boring human scenes in fantasy. It's like my absolute favorite, because a lot of times in like these really intense trials and like they're fight or flight, running for their lives, and then it's like you turn the page and they're under the willow tree and, you know, they're having thumb wars. I just love getting to kind of tear down the walls and to see them for who they really are in these gentle, soft moments, rather than when they're running for their lives, competing and things. I think it really helps the reader connect more with the character when they have those moments to like breathe and be themselves. So those are my favorite, and I have a lot of those. Like I have them, you know, having little thumb wars and like talking about their favorite foods. I'm like, oh, it's just so cutesy. That's my favorite thing to write.
I love it, and it's very relatable too. And you know, speaking of your characters, Hayden and Adina have a very strong bond in Powerless. What was it like writing two very different characters who are both equally strong?
Yeah, it was really great, because they're almost two sides of the same coin. And when I was 18 and writing Peyton, she was really, I think, what I needed at the time. She was so like strong and sure of herself and like stubborn, and she knew what she needed, and I loved that. And I kind of strived, I think, to be more like that. And so she was very important to me at a very pivotal time in my life, you know, trying to figure out who I was and who I wanted to be and things. And so on the flip side of that, Adina is so like soft and gentle and just like bubbly, and she's also who I strive to be, like half glass full rather than half glass empty. And I see myself more in Adina than I do Peyton, but it was just so amazing getting to play around with how strong they both are in very different ways. Peyton is very like physically, she can fight, she's got a lot of like observant little things that she does to pass as a psychic, and she's very strong outwardly, whereas Adina is, I think there's such a strength to being soft and being vulnerable and a gentle person. I think sometimes that's overlooked, especially in like the fantasy genre where all the females are like fighting and, you know, slaying the bad guys, which we love to see it. But I really enjoyed writing Adina because she was the opposite of that, but she was just as strong in everything that she went through, and how she's the reason why Peyton is the girl that she is. And if it weren't for Adina, then I think Peyton had every right to be the bad guy. So it was just really beautiful to see their stories kind of intertwine and how they both affected each other. But they're so different, and I love them both.
Yeah, no, it's kind of related to that. How do you write your fight scenes, and then how do you do your banter?
Yes.
Kind of two different aspects as well.
Yes. For my fight scenes, this is so fun, because if you have followed on social media for a while, you might have seen that I have little sword bookmarks, and I would sit in my bed and like fully stage out a full fight with these little sword bookmarks. And I'd be like, okay, parry, and, you know, lunge, and all this stuff. I play with the little bookmarks. It was really helpful to like map out my scenes. But what I do now is I'll find like a ton of hand-to-hand combat compilations. My search history is crazy. Like, it is kind of terrifying. But I'll find these compilations on YouTube and I'll slow them down to like 0.3 so I can really watch their movements, because I have never thrown a punch in my life. Do I look like I've thrown a punch? You know, like I couldn't even tell you the right way to do that, but I've watched and like consumed so much of that I try to take what I see and to put it into words, which is really fun. And for banter, which I love, it's like one of my favorite things to write. I find the easiest way to do it is to have one character who is an instigator and one who is a reactor. And so Kai is always going to instigate. Without a doubt, he's always going to try and get under Peyton's skin. And I mean, he's obsessed with her, but he's always trying to like annoy her in a way. And Peyton's always going to react to that. So rather than trying to take like two separate pieces of dialogue and show them together, it's nice to have that flow, and it feels like it's very seamless the way they're going back and forth. but I just have so much fun with it. And Kai, he just like falls onto the page. I barely even have to try. I don't know what that says about me, but I really do love writing him. He's a lot of fun. So it's a good time all the time when I get to write a scene. I'll go in my outlines and just write a cute little scene between Peyton and Kai. And then when I get there, it's like they already know what to say. So I just follow their lead. They're a lot of fun.
They are so much fun. I really enjoyed them. You have some amazing slides here.
Yes.
Could you take us through some of them? And then I would love to ask what you could tell us about the finale, Fearless.
Yes, okay. Speaking of Fearless, this is kind of a little mood board I put together, and it's a little dark, as you can see. It definitely ages up a little bit, and just like the depth of what's happening and like the stakes are high again. As we can see, you're kind of gonna go on a little journey in this book, and it was very fun for me to write. She's thick, she's just as big as Powerless, in case you were wondering. But yeah, this is a little mood board of what you might see in the book. Oh yes, here's my characters. Here's some really great fan art. I love this kind of like comic book style. It's so fun, the little quotes and the bubbles. They're both so gorgeous, and I love writing them. So just to give you a little idea of their scenes, lots of daggers to throats, lots of that happening in every single book. Here is the world. Give you a little look as to what you're getting yourself into. By the end of the series, you have gone to all of the different locations, which is very fun and really great for me to just be like, ooh, like I'll take them into the forest now. So I have a lot of options, and I actually had someone come up and say, did you just write Michigan? Because we have the dunes and the forest and like all the water, and I'm like, did I? I might have, just like subconsciously. So this is the world, beautiful map. Let's see. Oh, and here's Powerless, and some of the really beautiful translations it's been turned into, which has been so insane to see. I always, anytime I do an event, I'm like, if this many people had read my book, like, I would be so happy. If you told 18-year-old me, I'd be like on the floor. So it's amazing to see that. And then exciting news, Powerless is picked up to be a TV series, which I'm really excited about. Which is why I love picking your brain about all of this stuff, because I'm just now stepping into.
We will talk.
Oh yes, I'm like, I need to learn all the things. But yes, so that's so exciting. I have another slide on it here. It's by Lyrical, and so they did some of these like really fun movies that we know. And I'm so excited. I am going to be as involved as I can be, because I want to make sure the Kai casting is as good as it can be. I'm going to do my best, I promise. But obviously there's not anything to watch right now, but I do have the audiobooks, and this is Chase Brown. I had to put him up there because the girlies love him. He is like the voice of Kai. I can't even imagine someone else like saying Kai's words other than him. So if you need something to hold you over, the audiobook, they did a phenomenal job. Like really, really great. So here's the little synopsis for you. And there is the cover, which I have something to show you. This is the beautiful crown. It's actually made, handmade. It's beautiful. We have a couple of them, and this is gonna sound like a plug, I promise it's not. But there is a pre-order campaign where people are gonna be winning some crowns, which is really, really cool.
Oh, I want that crown.
Yeah, it's so gorgeous. So the cover is actually, if you look at the cover here, it's a picture of the crown that was made. So they had a photographer come in and take the photos, and it's gorgeous. And there's me. And that's it for my little spiel. So yes, we can go on to some like general questions back and forth, because I want to hear more about your process of writing, and like, especially with sequels, I would love to hear like, what is that like, having to take all the information from book one and putting it into book two, and how do you go about doing that?
Yeah, so here's where we're gonna like play around with our slides, but they're not in necessarily the exact right order. But yeah, definitely writing sequels is it's a totally different experience because so much is established already. With Loveboat, I had originally written the first novel at draft 25 from 4 points of view, and it was too big. I was still learning how to write a novel, and I didn't know what was wrong with this thing. It felt really shallow, and I finally realized, oh, there's too much story for one book. And so I scrapped it entirely, and I rewrote it from the ground up from just one character's point of view, that's Ever. But I had all this leftover story, especially Xavier, who's a fan favorite. He's like the bad kid who just, it turns out he's got a secret, but he's from another wealthy Taiwanese family and is just not meeting standards. But he was a fan favorite, and so I was thrilled to get to write more about him from his perspective, where they have another adventure in Taiwan. Sophie ends up joining him, and she's trying to build a fashion AI app, bringing together her interest in AI with her girly interest in fashion, and bringing the two together. And so the two of them have an adventure, but I wanted to bring the whole gang back, because I think you just fall in love with your characters, and your readers do too. And so book 2 is an opportunity to bring the whole gang back for an adventure pretty shortly after the events of the first one. And so book 2 is kind of already ready to go. And then, as I mentioned, the third book, we get to follow them a generation later. It feels like a generation later, even though it's just the younger sister. And this one was actually, I had to find another reason for her to go to Loveboat. Like, I didn't want it to feel like the same, like, Ever's parents forced her to go, and Ever didn't want to go. So for Pearl, she actually was kind of interested in it. It was something she'd known her sister had a great experience, and so I got to play with that contrast. Like, Pearl, when she goes actually because she has a social media blow up where she posts a picture of herself in a certain hat, and she gets blasted. And it's not so much the fallout on social media that got to her, but because of the big fallout on social media, this prestigious music program that she was a part of withdrew her offer, and so she had nothing left to do that summer. And it was kind of like a cautionary tale, like with social media, but like really she has to grapple with that all summer, like what happened, like what could I have done differently? And actually there weren't necessarily things she could have done differently, but she grows into a stronger person. But so she ends up going to Loveboat excited to be there, like, oh, maybe I'm gonna find my boy wonder just like my big sister. And so it was fun to play with those dynamics.
Oh, that's so fun.
Yeah, what about you with your 3?
Oh, I would say I didn't even think I'd get to write another one. So I was like, wow, this is so amazing that people read the first one. And so when I stepped into Reckless, which is book 2, it was definitely a learning curve of like, okay, I knew where I wanted the story to go and what I wanted the reader to kind of experience. And it was very much like Hayden and Kai's journey throughout that book so that they could step into book 3, because there's a lot happening in that one. So it was a learning curve for sure, especially figuring out the dynamic of like, okay, I gotta make sure everyone remembers what happened in the first one. And that was something, I know growing up, I was always like, how do authors do that? They sum up the first book so nicely in the first couple chapters of the second one without feeling like an info dump or like they're retelling the whole book. And so it was very much those first couple chapters I had to kind of dip my toes in of like, okay, how do I go about doing this? Because this is all still very new to me. And but I figured it out and I kind of got my footing a little bit. And once I got into the story, I just like was in it. And I think the book was written in like under 3 months, and I just like powered through, and I was very excited about it. But I would say book 3 has definitely been kind of the problem child a little bit, but in a good way. I think there was just more pressure on it as a finale, and now stepping into it with like so many excited people, which is such a blessing, but also a little bit scary. And I can hear what people want or what they don't want. And, you know, we can talk about social media also a little bit later. But yeah, it was very interesting having to wrap everything up and then take all these little breadcrumbs throughout the series and bring them all together in the end. But it was great. And writing novellas, I have Powerful is kind of a tandem read with Powerless. You can read them at the same time, and it follows Adina and her story. And that was also such a learning curve in figuring out how to do that. But there's another novella coming, so I have to do it again, which is great. I'm very excited, but it's been a journey with her.
Well, maybe we should jump to marketing, social media. You do it so well. How do you do it?
I just yap. I just go on the internet, and because it all stemmed from just me being a reader and having such a passion for YA books, especially because I was very much in that age range. And I just found people that were very like-minded and they enjoyed the same things, and I kind of went on there and just talked about my favorite tropes, my favorite books, and so now it's really fun to kind of learn the balance between writing and being on social media, and I love teasing everyone. I love making them a little bit angry, so I'll like tease little snippets of the books and people get upset, but I'm just like, tee. But it's very fun. I don't really have a schedule or anything. It's kind of just like when I feel that I want to post something or I have something to say, then I will. I don't try to put too much pressure on it, but it's a great tool to help so many authors, get their foot in the door. So I'm very thankful for it. What about you? How do you feel about everything on the internet?
No, I know social media is important. It's like one of those things. I would joke that I had to get remedial training from my publisher. Like I don't know how to put stuff out there. But it definitely became a lot more important with the movie coming out. And my film actually came out during the double strike in Hollywood, where the actors were on strike and the writers were on strike. And so because I was the author and executive producer, I was the only one who could help promote the film from the group. So I ended up doing a lot more social media then, and that's where I kind of picked up following. But then as a result, my following is split half movie lovers and then half book readers. And so it is really wonderful to come to a place where everyone loves books, and just to be here together with all of you guys. And yeah, I think it's for me, I feel like I have to do it. But I do enjoy being directly in contact with readers, and I love hearing from them through DMs and just when they comment. And I think that is a really special thing that social media has given us that we wouldn't have had 200 years ago.
Right, absolutely. I love that we're so close to the readers and we can hear exactly what they want to read. And I think that's such a special relationship. To be so close to them, so that's amazing. I guess we don't have much time, right?
So we can talk. Maybe we had a couple of things about our. Should we do maybe one writing process question and then lightning round?
Yes, perfect. I would like to know. Do you have a schedule for your writing? I need to take notes.
Yeah. So I don't. When I was working, I worked in for those years that I was writing those 4 novels that I buried. I would write at night, from 9 to 12 with the tea kettle on. My husband would be working at night too, and so then we'd just kind of co-work. And then I ended up taking a smaller job so that I could have more space for the writing and raise my kids, and so that kind of gave me a good balance. I did leave my corporate job 2.5 years ago to do the writing of the movies full time, and I found, it's been fun, but I found that I actually don't write more per day, and I found that was true for a lot of other authors. Stephen King writes 3 hours, Philip Pullman writes 3 hours, and then they read 3 hours or they do something else. And so that's pretty much my schedule. I try to write 3 hours, and then I'll do producing work or take meetings for the other parts of my day, and then deal with logistics and kids stuff. What about you?
That's incredible that you balance all of that. That's amazing. I only really write, and I can barely do that half the time. Because I'm it's just there's a lot of distractions, and so I've been trying to be better about having a schedule.
Well, I think that's what I mean, but I don't know that it's feasible to write that many more hours.
Because imagine writing 9 to 5, all of those hours. It's just your brain would be so fried.
Yeah.
So I'll take breaks here and there, and obviously I love to read or do social media or just some of the other things I'm working on behind the scenes. But when it comes to writing, I heard another author say that she gets stickers and she rewards herself for every 15 minutes she writes. Mm-hmm. So then at the end of the day, you could go look at your sheet of stickers and be proud of yourself.
Yeah, have a visual.
And I'm so I bought the stickers. Haven't tried it yet, but I'll let you know how it goes. Because I'm I do need to have some sort of reward to be look, I worked 7 stickers worth today.
Maybe we can do let's see, what are we working on next? And then a lightning round?
Perfect.
Okay, let's do it. Cool. Do you want to go for what are you working on next?
Yes, okay, so I just finished kind of wrapping up Fearless, which was very exciting and kind of nice to get off my plate. Been working on her for a while. And then right now I'm working on novella things. I'm excited to talk more about that. I can't say when or who at the moment, but I'm very excited for that. And then in the future, working towards a duology that's very thriller and fantasy based.
That's Awesome.
What about you?
So for me, I am working on, I think we gave a sneak peek earlier. So this is actually not public yet, but I did get permission to share it here at YALLFEST. So this is my 5th novel. It's coming out next year, and it's actually a novel about a kid who builds a virtual reality world that is infused with artificial intelligence. It's an AI generation novel that I wrote in 2014. It was actually my critical thesis, 2015. It was my critical thesis for VCFA, and it was too early to publish a book about AI generation. So it's clean AI, by the way. There's no copyright violations in the AI that's created in the story. But it's not actually made with AI itself. It's a story about a family that uses and invents AI, an AI world. So I am actually filming the prequel to the short film. Sorry, it's a prequel short film to this novel now, and that's like kind of what's keeping me busy, and it's going to be my directorial debut.
That's amazing. I'm so excited.
I'm having fun with this one.
Yes, we'll talk. I'm excited to hear more about that. Yes, okay, lightning round, really quick. Perfect. What is your favorite drink? The important questions here.
Yes, so I love a good chai latte.
I do too.
Yeah, your favorite drink?
Ooh, high C. Fortunately, did I already have a high C today? I did.
I didn't get my chai. I still need it. Favorite book of non-living author?
This is really difficult. I feel like I love my poetry, so I want to say like Sylvia Plath, like something along those lines. I'm just very inspired by just poetry in general. Oh, let me hear about you.
So I would say of the 3 that I showed, it would be C.S. Lewis, and my directorial dream would be to direct A Horse and His Boy, which has never been made. So I think I would be awesome at it.
Yeah, I'm sure.
It's because I love it so much.
Yes, absolutely. Contemporary versus fantasy.
So I actually love fantasy, even though I've written, I guess, four contemporaries now, but to me, they always feel like fantasy.
Yes.
Yeah, for you?
I would have to say fantasy, but I do love contemporary, but I think I lean more towards fantasy.
Yeah, and I feel like I wrote mine as fantasies, even though
they're
in our worlds.
Right, absolutely. Morally gray versus golden retriever.
So I love this question that you came up with, and I don't know what golden retriever is. So tell me.
Using all the like brain rot terms. Yeah, golden retriever is very much like bubbly, like kind, typically like a blonde man. It doesn't have to be, but typically he's blonde.
Interesting. What is your choice?
I feel like when I'm reading a book, morally gray, like I love a man who's a little, like he's got a backstory and like problems. But in real life, do I want that? Like, I don't know, maybe look for yourself. Right.
Got it. I think I'm with you then. I'm definitely with you.
Okay, we'll agree on that. And then favorite trope, do you have?
I love me a good love triangle, and it's in like every single one of the books.
Loveboat, yes.
Even book 4 or book 3 has a love quadrangle. I just can't get away from them.
Yes.
And I think it's because it's a good problem to have.
Yes, that's so true. That is so true.
What about you?
I would have to say the nightmare trope, because it almost always leads into one bed trope. So you'd be like a 2 for 1. Which sounds so crazy to people who don't read. Like, yes, the nightmare trope. Like, what are we talking about?
Yeah.
But I think it's your favorite.
Right. So I think we have to wrap, but like, let's talk about how do people find us? How can they follow us?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So let me find my slide with my. Wrong way. Here we go. So you can find me on social media, Abigail Hing Wen, and I have a newsletter too. That's actually the best way for me to stay in touch with you. You can sign up on my website, abigailhingwen.com, and I'll let you know when I'm in your neck of the woods.
That's amazing. You can find me on social media, Lauren Roberts Library, and I'm always just on there yapping about something. So if you would like to join, there I am. And thank you so much.